Kick off the evening and just pose a question to the group. With all the technological change and innovation going on today, if you were designing a university, how would you go about doing it? What sort of degrees would you offer? What curriculum would you offer? And that's really one of the challenges facing the world of education today. You know, how to prepare a curriculum in a university to educate kids for a very uncertain future. And that's exactly what these three women are doing. They're building a new university, a new liberal arts college in Kampala, Uganda. And they've boldly laid the foundations for it already. One big takeaway tonight, for me, as a lot of you know, this is the second time around, and I've kind of evaluated this from a business plan standpoint. And to me, like, all the pieces are in place with this school and it's ready to go. With that in mind, and they'll get into this in more detail, they are hoping to launch classes in September of next year. And their broader fundraising goal for doing that is 500 grand. They need about 250 grand minimum to get going. And their longer kind of intermediate term to kind of build out the campus and expand it is $5 million. But again, we'll get into that in more detail. The first speaker I really want to introduce is Sheila. Before I do, I just want to thank Annie, wherever you are. If not for Annie, you'd be eating cold Domino's pizza right now.
Thank you, Annie.
What happened to the Domino's?
That's dessert. It's, you know, the other person I want to acknowledge is my brother, Ross, who drove down from Tahoe. And without Ross, I wouldn't have met our first speaker, Sheila. But I just want to tell a story about how Sheila met. Ross and I were skiing at Palisades. And he knows I helped start Musizi University in Ghana 25 years ago. And he's like, there's this woman I'm working with, you really need to meet, Sheila. And so I'm driving over Donner Summit later that day in a snowstorm, kind of patchy cell reception. And I asked Sheila, have you ever heard of Musizi University? And she said, yeah, I have. And so I was pleasantly surprised. And then I asked her, have you heard of Musizi University in Uganda? And she says, well, as a matter of fact, I'm childhood friends with the co-founder, Elaine. We went to boarding school together. And I'm sitting there watching the snowflakes hit the windshield. That's sinking in a little bit. There's 49 million people in Uganda.
Absolutely.
I know two of them, and they're both in this room tonight. And there's been a lot of really kind of, low probability things like that have kind of brought us all together here. But so I want to kind of brag about Sheila a little bit. She'll go into more details, but she's, I mean, this is literally a miracle. Somebody who grew up in a household of low means to make it out of Uganda into the highest levels of education in the U.S., and then at the highest levels of a corporate career in tech here, working in the Silicon Valley. So with that, I could go on about you, Sheila, but I don't want to steal your thunder. So let me start by just asking you a question. What brought you to getting involved in Musizi and kind of returning your focus to Uganda a bit?
Thank you, Neil. Just super briefly, I marvel at every time I think of how we met, how the universe conspired to us meeting. Thank you, everybody, for being here. You could have been anywhere else, but you decided to be here tonight. So thank you. Can you hear? You can't hear me? Okay, I'll speak louder. Thank you, everybody, for being here tonight. One thing to point out before I answer your question, Neil, we do have postcards on the tables that have testimonials of high-performing Ugandan students, high schoolers who are so eager for Musizi University doors to open. So I encourage you during the course of the evening to take a look and read their stories. I think they're so inspiring. So to answer your question, Neil, how I got involved, I think launching a university like Musizi in Uganda is the right thing to do on its merits, and Takako and Elaine will go through the details of that. But for me, it's also deeply personal. I was born in Uganda, in Kampala, and raised by a single mother who believed that having an education was non-negotiable for us. And so she made sure that we went to the best schools that she could afford anyway, and our grades would allow us to go to. And one of those good schools was St. Mary's, where I met Elaine in high school as teenagers. So when Elaine told me about this amazing venture, I thought, wow, this is the thing that we've always wanted to have in Uganda, and my friend is a part of it. So, but I'm fast forwarding. So I was born in Uganda, raised in Uganda, all that. When I was 17, I applied to the United World College program. I don't know if anyone's familiar with it. You are cool. For those who are not, it's a co-ed, international baccalaureate-based boarding school program with 14 campuses across the world. At the time that I applied, there were 4 spots across all of Uganda. 4 spots across for 200,000 students that were eligible that year. I knew that I had the grades, but I didn't like my odds. So I was hesitant to apply, but my mom insisted. In her tenacity, she was like, you're gonna do it, you're gonna apply. And that didn't surprise me too much because my mom, for as long as I can remember, her dreams for her children were bigger than the size of her wallet. So there I was applying for this school, no chance of getting in, but unbelievably, I won that scholarship, and that one yes changed my life. I ended up in the UK for high school. I then moved to the US, to Minnesota, where I went to Macalester College, a small liberal arts college.
Oh, yeah, nice.
Go Mac! Went to Mac for 4 years, and then went on to MIT to study electrical engineering and computer science. Got my master's.
Go electrical engineer!
I think you mean that.
That was heartfelt.
Got my master's and PhD in EECS, and then ended up in the Bay Area, where I've been leading the design and development of camera systems in consumer electronics and autonomous driving spaces at Apple, and most recently Cruise. But I know I didn't get here alone. I owe a lot of that to my mother, to my teachers, to my mentors, but most importantly to access to scholarships and quality education. And so when I think about my why, it's because this is a great idea, but also where I am because I had access.
That's awesome. That's great. Sheila, when you think about for you that your decision of your education to either remain in Uganda or going overseas for an education, how do you think about that? What are the pros and cons of it?
So pursuing an education for me meant leaving my family behind, leaving my home behind. And it was in the pursuit of a fantastic opportunity. I was so fortunate to get a scholarship. Who was I to think, oh, I'm leaving my family behind, poor me. But leaving what mattered to me, the people that mattered to me behind, and having to recalibrate to a new life has been difficult, or was difficult, and I feel that more and more as I'm getting older. I wished that I had the chance or the option to get a quality education in Uganda where I was without having had to make the quiet sacrifice of moving away. I mean, you think at the time of moving that it's going to be temporary. You're going to go away, you're going to get a degree, you're going to, manage to create something meaningful, and then eventually you go back. But time has a way of stretching, and before you know it, this is your new setting. And so that came at a cost.
Mm.
And I wish it didn't have to be that way.
Gotcha. Great. Well, thanks for sharing that story, Sheila. That's wonderful. Maybe I could take the opportunity to introduce Elaine. Elaine is the co-founder of Musizi. Elaine is also born and raised in Kampala. She was kind of busy with building her law career and also raising a family. And she recognized that Kampala really needed a more affordable, high quality K through 12 school. And she decided to do something about that, not just for her own children, but for others as well. And she founded the North Green School, a K through 12 school, in 2017. And they started with humble beginnings with 30 students, and she's grown that to over 700 in 8 short years. And there's a lot of people who dream of starting a school in Africa. There's very few who have 8 years of successful, profitably sustainable operating experience that Elaine has. And so she did that all while helping to build her family's law practice and also raising 4 young children. She also remained in Uganda and got her law degree there. And so Elaine, if I could ask you kind of what, you built the North Green School, you've been doing that for 8 years, it's going great. What was the catalyst or what prompted you to think about starting Musizi?
First of all, thank you so much, Neil, for hosting this, and everybody, thank you so much for being here. You could, like Sheila said, be in so many other places, but you're here today, so thank you. And it's hard to tell the story of why without going back to where it all began. And it always warms my heart to hear Sheila's story because I was there at the beginning of it. When we were young and our life was not in our hands in some ways. Now we're adults and they say it's in our hands. But anyway, we went to Mount St. Mary's College Namagumba, which was a school that taught us excellence. It taught us the importance of pursuing everything that you did to the highest possible standard that you could. Not because anyone was watching, but because it was the right thing to do. And Sheila embodied that spirit. So when she got her scholarship and went to UWC and to McAllister and later to MIT, we were so proud and quietly hopeful because in some way she carried us with her. And yet I often thought about the other 120 of us that stayed behind, equally hardworking, equally dedicated, but just didn't get an opportunity to have this sort of access to a system that rewarded excellence, to a system that gave mentors, that modeled that excellence, and a system that just met someone at the point where their effort was, which is what I believe Sheila got, having the opportunity to have this education abroad. I myself, this particular question of access remained with me for so many years. How do we make access, how do we give access to this quality education to more young people? And myself, I had gone on to go to university in Uganda to study law at Makerere University, which, by any standard was a good university. So I was hopeful, I was going to go study the law, learn very practical skills, change the world, solve world peace. Uganda had just come through a period of war. But when I arrived, it was the expectation did not meet the event. The event did not meet the expectation. it was rote learning, notes at the photocopier, you know, results, exam results that went missing, you running around for months to try and figure out what your CGPA was because you hadn't seen your full transcript. No one was waiting for you to ask critical questions and to, you know, to be that independent thinker. You basically just needed to get through this rote learning system and come out on the other side quietly and go and figure out how to be great in the world. So it was more of a disillusionment for me. So years later, when my sisters were going to university, my parents had seen the frustration that I had faced at law school, and they had a deep desire to give my sisters a better chance. So they made an enormous sacrifice, you know, depleting their private, you know, resources, selling family land, and that's a really big thing where we come from, you know, to sell your family land to send somebody to school. And it wasn't just that, it was a collective effort. Aunties, uncles, cousins pitched in to make sure that my sisters went and got this education abroad, because they fundamentally believed that the only way to get a quality education was to send somebody abroad rather than get it at home. And, you know, in a way, they were right, and my sisters did get an amazing education. But then they made the decision to come back home. And that, a lot of people weren't happy with that, because they had gotten this really, really pricey education, and the least they could have done was stay wherever they had gotten it so that they could get the true value of it. You know, it's not that when they came home they got jobs, so you would say they were successful, except that the entry-level salaries were very sobering, you know. They were starting salaries of about $200, and even with really hard work and diligence, it would take about 6 to 10 years for you to rise from $200 to about $600
Per month.
Yes. So if you've paid $30,000, $40,000 a year, and you don't have the family land anymore, your parents are looking at you with your meager $200 salary and saying, what was this for? So this experience, I think, made two massive truths very clear to me. That in some ways, many parts of our economy were just not ready to receive the sort of excellence that the education abroad would give. Just the habits, the structures, the forms that are able to harness and sustain certain levels of excellence and quality were just too fragile. So that was one thing. But the other thing is that even where the levels of excellence were where they're supposed to be, the market just wasn't in a place where it could afford that excellence yet. So industries cut corners, you know, jobs are low paying, and these two things kind of feed off of each other. So you have a situation where a poor economy exacerbates low standards, and low standards make sure that the economy stays poor. So that's kind of sad, but one thing that's interesting about that is you then realize that if you improve one thing, you can improve the other. And that's what Musizi is about. It's not just about the need to have high quality graduates. It's also about creating an ecosystem that can sustain that level of excellence, because it allows industry to expect more. If industry expects more, industry will pay more, but doing it at a level that basically meets the sacrifice where it is in terms of the fees that's been paid. So it's I mean, I get a little bit emotional when I talk about this. So that's why I wrote these notes down, to make sure that I don't get into this whole hole, and now I'm like, oh, I've said everything.
8 years ago.
Yeah, but so Musizi is not just, as I said, about producing excellent graduates. It's about making sure that students can get, one, the professional competence, the global exposure, the discipline and the ethical reflexes that once required going abroad. Because what Sheila gained when she left was not brilliance. She already had that. Lots of it, I must say. But what she got was structure, mentorship, accountability, and an environment of excellence that met her effort where it was. And that's what Musizi will now offer at home. And for me, this journey with Musizi started with the North Green School. For many other reasons, which I won't get into here, but also just the realization that if we wait just to solve this problem at the tertiary level, you then have people who have been raised in a rote learning system, and then you're suddenly trying to change them at the age of 18, and it just doesn't work. So 8 years ago, my husband and I sold a piece of family land. I know the spirits must be shivering, but we sold a piece of family land, and we started with 30 students, 8 teachers, and one single belief that if we build a school that was steeped in excellence and values, families would come. And they did. And so today we have 700 young people who we are grooming in confidence, curiosity, and a leadership culture that's steeped in the sort of excellence that me and Sheila enjoyed while we were at Mount St. Mary's. So
Yeah, that's wonderful, Elaine. Just listening to you talk, it made me think that there must be some students that stick out in your mind and some kind of human interest stories. Maybe you could share a couple of those with us.
Yeah, absolutely. This one young man here, Michael Mwesigwa, he reminds me of Sheila. Michael was a quiet, brilliant student and a recipient of our Resident Directors Award. The Resident Directors Award is our highest award for academic excellence at the North Green School. And while he was at the North Green School, he received the sort of mentorship, exposure, purpose that I would like to think Sheila received while she was at UWC. And he was also a really diligent student. And in his final exam, he scored the best mathematics grades in sub-Saharan Africa in the Cambridge International Examinations. And that's a great thing, but it's also enormous pressure. Because my next question was, what do I do with Michael? Do I send him to Makerere where I went so that he can run around looking for his full transcript for the next, God knows how long? And so we worked really hard to try and find a scholarship for Michael. And just a couple of weeks ago, he started his degree in medicine at Nottingham University on full ride scholarship. So I'm excited for Michael. And I'm extremely proud of him, but as much as I am proud of him, he also keeps me up at night. Because there are so many young, bright people like Michael and Sheila. And for how long will the world absorb these bright stars for us before we build a sky of our own? I think this, as much as the scholarships are great, they are not sustainable. Because if they were, all the 120 of us would be somewhere with Sheila. So there has to be a sustainable way to solve this. And that comes back to why we need to build Musizi at home, and why it is not just a good thing to do, but why it is extremely urgent. It's urgent because we number one need to build excellence at scale and in time. Because when these opportunities don't come in time, a lot of bright stars fade, and just never reach their fullest potential. But we also need to redeem the sacrifice of the parents who pay for this education. To make it worthwhile, by making sure that we connect that learning experience to the livelihoods that these children will be able to get at home. Because, you know, everybody wants to stay at their home, incidentally, contrary to what some people might think. But number 4, we need to also create a critical mass at home of forward-thinking young people with the agency and the critical thinking and the skills to actually change Uganda and move it forward. We should give you a name. That's something that only Africans often can do, so I'm so proud of you. And in doing these 4 things, we aren't starting from scratch. The North Green School, and those are some of our students, has outgrown some of its buildings. And we have ceded one of our buildings to Musizi University, and which we did this 3 years ago. And Musizi was able to convert it, you know, into a nice, modern, little building where they will be able to start their first campus. Today, that building is fully functional, and it has 3 classrooms, you know, a computer lab, a library, and little, you know, nooks and corners where students will be, where their first class of 50 students will be able to meet. And
Is it being used today?
well, yes, I mean, that's where Takako and myself, when I am wearing the Musizi hats, sit. But also that's where a lot of these young wings scholars, and that Takako will tell you about that, the wings program, meet when they are here. We over the next 6 years, over the next couple of years, as we build our own purpose-built school as a North Green School, we will continue to hand over to Musizi some of these buildings which we have already flipped into classrooms, like this building here, which currently holds our upper secondary school. And so Musizi should be able to not have to start from where we started as the North Green School. And I think, you know, that I wish I was Musizi when I started the North Green School. But on the subject of Musizi University, I knew that, you know, even though I had, you know, experienced a certain degree of success with the North Green School, I'd say, you know, building a school is like building an excellent sports car. But a university is like a jumbo jet. So it wasn't something that I thought I could do on my own, for sure. And I'd been looking up this university in Ghana called Ashesi, which I thought was very inspirational in terms of the, you know, it had done the work that I thought we needed to do. And so in 2020, I was introduced to a young lady who was teaching in Ghana, and her name is Takako Mino. And from the very first conversation that we had, I just knew that this was like the next chapter, because, you know, she was at Ashesi and already experiencing part of what, you know, I wanted to do. And so for the last 5 years, as a very small and in some ways big team of 2, we've worked quietly to do a lot of, you know, groundwork to make this vision possible, and to start what will be the beginning of educating a new crop of Ugandan leaders, a new crop of African leaders, which will be a new dawn, not just for my country, but for the continent. Thank you.
That's great, Elaine. Thank you for sharing that. That brings us to our next speaker. It is amazing what you two have accomplished on your own. It blows me away. We had teams of people doing, you know, that for Ashesi. But so this brings us to our next speaker that I'm excited to introduce, Takako Mino. Takako and I share the same alma mater, Claremont McKenna College, a liberal arts college in Southern California. We have a Scripps alumni here, and Dana, and the father of a new Scripps student, my friend Seth Sacco.
We have 3 Claremont McKenna alumni.
Oh, okay,
who are
great,
friends.
awesome,
My classmates. too.
awesome.
Go
Claremont,
Claremont.
Claremont's well represented tonight. Takako went on to get her doctorate in education at the Claremont Graduate Schools, and then went on to actually teach at Musizi University, the school I helped found 25 years ago. And so I got to put on my glasses to read about Takako's credentials because they're long, and I do have a cheat sheet here. But she also worked at a lot of different institutions across Uganda, including the following: the Economic Policy Research Center, a leading think tank in Uganda; the Forum for African Women Educationalists, a Pan-African NGO promoting girls' education; the African Rural University, the first such all-women's school in rural Africa; the Asante Africa Foundation. I thought we'd get a shout out for that one. It's one of the absolute best premier foundations in all of Africa. Which provides education, skills, and opportunities for East African youth, as well as she's worked a lot in the areas of public debate and speaking. So this wide range of experience makes Takako uniquely qualified to help launch Musizi. I also just Takako reached out to me about 2.5 years ago, and we're talking on the phone, and she kind of shared her educational background and teaching at Musizi, and then went on to mention she's co-founding this university in Uganda. And again, in terms of like the odds, the fact that a fellow CMCer had gone on to teach at Musizi and start a school in Africa, it really touched my heart. I was thinking last night that it kind of completed a circle for me, and then I realized in a lot of ways it's kind of completely expanded and opened up a circle to work with Musizi and kind of do it again. So with that, I'm very happy to introduce you to Takako. Takako, maybe again, if I can kick things off with a question. You know, with your cultural background, it's not obvious that a woman of Japanese descent would go to school in Africa and then go on to start a school in Uganda. Maybe you could share your story about how that came about.
Thank you so much, Neil. And
I would just like to say her Swahili is more proficient
Wow.
than probably many Ugandans.
I believe that.
And she's competitive with most Tanzanians. Her Swahili
You'd be happy to know that she has since also learned Luganda.
of course.
Very few people.
thank you so much, and thank you everybody for being here tonight with us. I will never forget hearing my grandmother's story of surviving the atomic bomb during World War II in Japan. Despite the tremendous suffering that she went through, sustaining severe burns all over her body, she did not want revenge. What she wanted was to make sure that no human being ever goes through this kind of suffering that she went through. So hearing her story and growing up in a Buddhist household where my parents continually encouraged me to find out my life's purpose, I began to think about what I could do to help contribute to creating a more peaceful world. So when I had the chance to study abroad when I was at CMC, I chose Uganda, which was just emerging from war. And I had the chance to meet with former child soldiers who were trying to reintegrate their lives after spending their childhood in war. And what every single one wanted to do was to go back to school, even if it meant starting first grade at 20 years old. So meeting these young Ugandans who had this deep hunger for education and deep belief that education was the way that they can rebuild their lives and also contribute to their communities, it really resonated with me. As a Japanese immigrant growing up in the US, I struggled a lot with self-confidence. I was that kid who never talked in class. So I would never raise my hand, I would just kind of be quiet and wish that nobody would notice me. But it's because I had amazing teachers and mentors that who believed in that something that they saw within me, that I was able to believe in myself and actually believe that I could make some kind of contribution in this world. So when I heard these young Ugandans share that same conviction with me, I realized that maybe this is the way that I can contribute to creating a better world that my grandmother wanted to see. And that brought me back to Uganda several times, working on education projects, where I saw firsthand how even extracurricular programs like debate can make a massive impact on young people's confidence. And it made me think how much more powerful education could be if there was an institution that could create a holistic experience for students to develop the empathy and the critical thinking skills and the leadership skills that they need to transform Uganda from within. So fast forward a bit, after serving as a teacher in the US for several years, and then also pursuing my PhD, I had the chance to teach at the first liberal arts college of Ghana, which is called Musizi University. And just so that people know, Ghana and Uganda kind of sound similar, but they're actually on different opposite parts of the continent. Ghana is in West Africa and Uganda is in East Africa. And I would say it's like a 6-hour flight to get from Ghana to Uganda. So these are and a big 3-hour time difference, so big distances apart, in very different contexts. But I had the chance to work at HSE and see how the liberal arts impacts young Africans, and when they're equipped with the critical thinking skills, with ethical leadership skills and entrepreneurial skills, how much their lives can transform. And it really excited me to think about the possibilities of doing that by creating a similar institution in Uganda. So during the pandemic, I was introduced to Elaine virtually, and she was already transforming the K-12 sector, and saw the university as a next step. And we realized that we had the same dream. And we asked each other, what if we worked on this massive whale of a project together? So 6 months later, this was back in 2020, so it's been 5 years since then, I moved to Uganda, and we've been working ever since on this project that we know is our life's work.
That's great. Thanks, Takako. Again, it really touches me that, Shesi's been able to help, and I know Patrick Awa, the founder and president of Shesi, has worked with both you and Elaine, but maybe you could elaborate on how that's kind of helped lay the foundations for Musizi in more detail.
What's been so wonderful about the Shesi connection is that rather than reinventing the wheel and figuring out everything from scratch, we've been able to stand on Shesi's shoulders. So Musizi is plugged into Shesi's Pan-African University network, where we basically learn best practices on curriculum, staff development, and student services. And we also have bi-monthly mentoring sessions with Shesi's founder, Patrick Awa. So that's really helped guide us in understanding how to take Musizi to its launch, and also to think about our programs. So before building our programs, we decided that we needed to understand the needs of students, parents, and employers first. So we did feasibility studies. We interviewed over 500 high school students and over 100 parents and employers, and we asked them, what do you want to see in a university education? We then took that feedback, and then along with support from Claremont McKenna College and Harvey Mudd College, we began designing some tailor-made curriculum based on the liberal arts, but for the Ugandan context. And we're going to start with 3 degree programs, one in software engineering, one in entrepreneurship, and one in health data science. We chose entrepreneurship because Uganda is the most entrepreneurial country in the world. Most people that you meet in Uganda already have some kind of side hustle or business going on. People love entrepreneurship, but the challenge is that most businesses don't last beyond 5 years. So we built our curriculum so that we take students through the entire enterprise life cycle, from market research, business planning, launching, pivoting, scaling, all within a supportive learning environment and being paired with veteran founders so that they can be guided along that journey in a more sustainable way, and that they can graduate with both a business and a degree. Secondly, we chose software engineering because Uganda and Africa are digitizing at a mind-boggling rate. Just this year, there's been 1 million more internet users in Uganda. So there's just a lot of need for people who can actually build tech solutions to meet the needs of the growing population. And our curriculum engages students in real software design processes so that they actually come out with the skills to be able to do that once they are out in the job market. And then finally, we chose health data science to support the national efforts to digitize health records in Uganda. And this is basically a program to help upskill health professionals so that they can become the talent to help data-driven decision-making for allocating limited resources to meet the most important needs in the health sector. So those are our programs. But we also have to think about, okay, we have this wonderful curriculum that we've built, but how would high school students know about this? So we actually began to think about what would the ideal student look like. And we thought about somebody who is creative, self-driven, ethical. And when we thought about that, we realized that this person would be incredibly difficult to find in an education system based on rote learning. So we needed to start earlier. So we started the Musizi Wings program, which now partners of 7 high schools in Uganda and mentors 50 fellows, mostly girls from low-income backgrounds. And all of these students are future potential Musizi students and eagerly waiting for Musizi to start. So you can see some of them here. And then we also had to think about the other side of the equation. So we thought about the high school students coming to Musizi, but then what would happen to students after they graduate from Musizi? Where would they go? They would actually need to go into the local businesses. And we realized that we need to start the Musizi Sustainable Business Institute to fill another critical gap, which is the lack of local business cases for students to learn from. So we decided to fill that gap by doing that research ourselves, and we've now written over 40 African business case studies, and also engaged over 100 business leaders, all of whom are future mentors and employers for Musizi students. In partnership with the Drucker School of Management, we also began to offer executive education program for business founders as well. So we've built pathways, and this was our conference in August that we held this year, which had over 100 participants. But we've built pathways now going into Musizi from the high schools. We've now built pathways out of Musizi into local businesses. So we've tried to build a virtuous cycle of support from the high schools, going to industry, university to industry, with positive feedback loops that can sustain itself.
That's excellent. Thanks, Takako. So we've heard kind of about your origin stories and how you kind of got involved with Musizi. And Takako, you watched us through the programs and curriculum. Maybe Elaine, if we could circle back to something a little more practical, the actual business plan, if you could kind of elaborate on that a bit.
Okay, so drawing from our experience with the North Green School, we've basically looked at some financial projections and to try and figure out what it would take to run and launch Musizi University, but also to make it sustainable. And so we set our annual fees at $5,000, which is about a 16th of what it would take to send one of my Bright Scholarship students to a liberal arts university here in the US. And when we look at this figure, we know from basically what parents are paying at the higher level of high school, that there are a lot of middle income families that want a better education for their children that will be able to afford this fee. However, we do not want Musizi to be accessible only to a limited number of people. We want it to be accessible to a diverse range of young Ugandans. And that includes girls, it includes youth from low income communities, refugees, as Uganda has one of the highest refugee populations in East Africa, East and Central Africa.
In the world, actually.
Actually, that's
You're
true.
number 2 in the world.
This is true. And recently, I was going to say someone was going to send another one to us, but we won't say anything about that. I don't know if he qualifies for a refugee. But yes, so we wanted Musizi to be accessible to more people, and that's why we launched the scholarship fund, so that we will admit students who qualify. If they are bright, young, well, they don't have to be, but if they are bright and they should be at Musizi, then they will be at Musizi on a needs-based scholarship. But, we've,
You want to show the operation?
yeah. Yeah. So when we think about how we get this thing off the road, we think that in 2026, given that facility that you showed, we should be able to start with 50 students. And that's from our experience of starting with 30 students, and because we know that it is important to have a proof of concept. Because even though we have been working on this for 5 years and we've planned everything and we think, you know, that we've planned everything to the dot, there will still be a lot of lessons that we will learn once we hit the ground running. And with 50 students, we should be able to iterate and, you know, perfect everything as we go along. But also, most importantly, that is the capacity that that small building will be able to handle. As we progress, and as the North Green School builds its purpose-built school and begins to hand over some of these 6 properties to Musizi, we believe that by 2028, that number will have grown to 200 students, now with 4 facilities. And hopefully by 2030, we will start the development of our own campus. The accreditation process in Uganda, which is a really rigorous one that we have been through successfully, by the way, that's a nice place to clap. Just because it's a lot to get the accreditation, is a 3-step process. And at the second step, you will be allowed to admit students and be a degree awarding institution. But you're allowed to do that for a certain period of time, for about 3 to 4 years, within which time you're expected to acquire your own land and then begin constructing your own purpose-built campus. So that's why we have that at 2032, where we hope that at that point, Musizi will have the capacity to educate every year 1,000 students. And
How long are the programs?
the programs are 4 years.
For?
The programs are 4 years. And from the lesson that we've learned from Ashesi and the impact that Ashesi is having in Ghana, Ashesi has a capacity of about 1,500 students. And someone might think, well, that's a drop in the ocean, you know, if you compare it to the population. But we believe in a ripple effect. And, you know, if our students, no, not if, when our students, when our students graduate, we believe that they will find employment in dignified jobs. And because they will be ethical and innovative workers, they will drive business growth in the companies that they will be in. That will result in increased household incomes, increased jobs, uplifted families, uplifted communities, strengthened local business ecosystems, and ultimately there will be reduced brain drain, because then we will be able to keep our best and brightest at home in a sky that is worthy of their efforts and their brilliance. But also, when our students who graduate and become entrepreneurs, those students will create dignified jobs, and they will create new products and services. Those new products and services will lead to healthy market competition, which will increase the quality and productivity of services. The increased quality of productivity and services will be able to allow companies to afford to pay better salaries to better talent, and it basically will create that ripple effect. And maybe sometimes that's all you need, to educate the next generation of forward-thinking leaders. And that brings me to our name, Musizi. Some people say, oh, that's an interesting name. The Musizi is a tree that tends to be strewn across coffee plantations in Uganda. And Uganda is one of the top 10 coffee producing countries in the world. And in the plantation, the tree grows really tall and straight and allows just the right amount of sunlight, to the coffee trees, so that the Ugandan coffee berry specifically, has a really distinct and special aroma. But birds also perch on these trees, and because of that, usually wherever you find a Musizi tree, you also find various life forms, different fruit trees and that sort of thing. So our hope is that our students will be the Musizi of their communities. Incidentally, the word Musizi in close to 23 Bantu languages means the sower, to sow. So it's the sowing tree. So our hope is that our students shall be sowers of change and catalysts of growth wherever they are, feeding into that ripple effect that we're talking about. And so I would like to thank you so much for giving of your time today and sowing in, by so doing, sowing in what could be and what will be a really amazing idea. I say what will be because it was always inevitable that at a certain point T, nations where things don't work were going to rise up and say enough. We cannot continue doing things the way that we're doing them and expect different results, like 1,000 monkeys jumping on a keyboard and expecting a Shakespeare sonnet on the other end. It was always the case that at some point, someone was going to say, let's do things differently. And I think that point has come. We here just happen to be the ones to do it, because it will happen. And what an honor it is to be the ones to have the opportunity to have this conversation about changing the future of young Africa. Thank you. So, we know we're going to sort of open up to Q&As, but so that we allow, we don't allow you to leave without something, should we?
Or would you,
Just go to Q&A.
Yes.
and
We go to Q&A?
but there's a gift for everybody at the end, so please don't leave without the gift.
Can we pause for 5 minutes to give her a hug if we haven't seen her?
Yeah. Yeah, and you can refresh your drinks or whatever, yeah. Grab a dessert.
To cocktails. Oh, Vermont.
Yeah, I missed your last question. That's okay.